square mile community, and it's bordered by the LA River to the north, actually the headways to the LA River, the 101 highway to the south, a state road called Canyon to the west, and then DeSoto to the east. Warner Center is also tucked between the two neighboring communities, a community called Woodland Hills, which is a wealthy residential neighborhood, and then a community called Canoga Park, which is more of a mixed and low-income housing and some light manufacturing in the neighborhood there. And then Warner Center, as you see, kind of straddles these two different neighborhoods. And Warner Center is very much known as the downtown of the valley. So there's high-rise office buildings in the face of a mostly flat area, big malls, retail stores, healthcare campus, a community college, and a park, which we'll show you more of images later. The legacy, present, and future of Warner Center is as a policy-guided community with an emphasis on transit and pedestrian accessibility. So Tricia and Brad have alluded to the Warner Center 2035 specific plan, or the Warner Center 2035 plan, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, and the importance of that. But embedded into the values of that plan is this idea of Warner Center, really relying on being a transit-oriented development. So for this project, and to give you background, we've broken down the components of Warner Center into three types of mobility consumers and three types of mobility activities. So we've got housing and residents, we've got businesses and workers, and then we've got entertainment and visitors. And then students and studying fall into those latter two categories. So from information about these three categories, we've derived mobility opportunity statements that I'll share with you towards the end of this webinar, and that'll form the basis of our workshop activities. There are 17,000 people who live in Warner Center, and it's pretty mixed demographically speaking. The average household size is 2.34, which means that some people are living alone, some people are living as couples, roommates, with caretakers, and that there are some small families. There's also an aging population, particularly in the areas around Kaiser Permanente Healthcare Campus, which you can see in this dark blue color in the southeast corner. Warner Center is also pretty mixed income, or mixed income-wise. The median household income is high relative to what it is in LA overall, but it's not necessarily equally distributed. So you've got some areas that are in the dark red that have a higher median income, some that are in this pink color that have a lower median income. Roughly 11% of the people who live in Warner Center also work in Warner Center. So many of these folks are traveling outside Warner Center for their jobs, or they are, young or older and not necessarily working or studying in the same place in Warner Center. At least right now, residents are mostly concentrated in three areas of Warner Center. So you got the bottom left and then the top right. With the building typologies, very different than LA's reputation. So you've got mostly dense townhomes, but older, especially in this area around the Warner Center Park. And then you have new multi-unit dwelling properties. And what these building typologies share in common is that they don't have a lot of room to grow when it comes to parking. Especially these new multi-unit dwellings have parking maximums. So tenants or owners are expected to live car-free or car-light. When it comes to the daytime population of Warner Center, so who are the businesses and workers who work in Warner Center, the population more than doubles. There's about 40,000 people overall who work in businesses in Warner Center. On this slide, you can see some of the major employers. So you have Kaiser Permanente, which has both a hospital and a healthcare campus. They serve the 2 million residents of the San Fernando Valley, and you have tens of thousands of hospital visits every year. There's URW, which is more commonly known as Westfield, and Westfield Tenants. They have a mall, they have the Village, which includes a Costco, and then a third property, which has a movie theater, plus plans to expand. You have Anthem, Farmers Insurance, Universal Music Group, Viking River Cruises, a new WeWork that just opened. And many of these employers, because they're so large, are eligible to be part of a voluntary transportation management organization, or a TMO. The TMO, which was just stood up this year, is called Warner Center Connects, and it's a nonprofit organization that helps these major employers comply with their TDM, or their travel demand management requirements, which means that they have to work to reduce the vehicle miles traveled from their properties and therefore from their employees. So some of these employers can and do offer van pool, carpool, parking shuttle options for their workers, and are looking to expand on those options. In this slide, you see where some of those major employers are located. So as I mentioned, down below in this southeast corner, you have Kaiser Permanente, which is currently undergoing a $44 million expansion to even improve and expand the services it provides. You have Pierce College, which is off of the Warner Center site to the right, which has 30,000 students and is a community college offering many different types of programs. You've got these three Westfield properties on the west side of Warner Center, which I had mentioned, the mall towards the top, then the village, which includes this Costco in the center, and then down below the movie theater. And then finally, you have mostly office parks in this fourth quadrant that's on the southeast part of the Warner Center footprint. And those are where Universal Music Group, Viking River Cruises, et cetera, are located. Many of these office parks are lined by parking garages, somewhat hard edges between some of these office buildings, with large and great sidewalks, actually, where the people, because it's more convenient to cut through the parking lots rather than go the long way on these beautiful sidewalks around the super blocks, mostly cut through. So you'll see a lot of people kind of sneaking their way through these different parking lots to get to their destination. These parking lots are by and large occupied during the day and unoccupied at night. So our last category of uses and users is entertainment and visitors. The map here shows places to play. So Warner Center actually has some really cool, both natural and then other types of entertainment options. The first is this Warner Ranch Park. So you see it down below in the southwest corner of Warner Center. This was formerly, and actually the whole of Warner Center, used to be the ranch of the eldest Warner brother. So Harry Warner, I think was his name. And when he turned over the land, part of it was dedicated as the Warner Ranch Park, which you see here, which is used mostly for concerts in the summer, for a major 4th of July party where, you know, they have upwards of, I think, 30,000 people who join. But it's just kind of a nice urban park here down in the southwest corner. You've also got the LA River bike path towards top of the Warner Center, which is 2 miles almost of dedicated paths along the headways and leading east towards other communities. And then you have the Orange Line bike path. So if you all are not familiar with the Orange Line, which is our bus rapid transit system extending from North Hollywood to beyond, they, when developing the Orange Line, also created a separated off-road contiguous bike lane path. That's a pretty amazing option of being able to connect from North Hollywood to communities like Warner Center. Then there,
Julia, if I might, I just wanted to interject very quickly 2 things. One, the 4th of July event gets 60,000 people each year. And 2, the Orange Line connects up to Chatsworth. It's a very, very long stretch, and it is the landscape has grown, and it's a beautiful way to experience the valley. That's all.
Perfect. I totally undersold that 4th of July party. Sorry, Tricia. So Westfield, these properties here in the Northwest, get 25 million visits a year. with plans on expanding their footprint and expanding what they offer in those properties. So looking to grow that number of visits. To the south of Warner Center and just below, you have Ventura Boulevard, which is known as a place where you can go to independent stores, mom and pop shops, some really beloved restaurants. And then to the north in Canoga Park, same deal, mom and pop restaurants and a theater. So how does everybody get to all of these cool places? You guessed it. For the most part, they drive. Warner Center has somewhat of a car-centric transportation network and what we call an arterial street grid. According to the High Injury Network, which is something that LA Department of Transportation had put together to look at where Vision Zero investments should be put, there are certain parts of the Warner Center street network that aren't that safe, that do have collisions and pedestrian and cyclist incidents. So despite this, I would say Warner Center is actually really well served by bus. There are 10 bus routes that are at an average 15-minute headway. These bus routes can take you all over the city and county, some places nearby like Canoga Park or Thousand Oaks, some places further away like even downtown, or they have a bus called the Beach Bus, which takes you to Malibu or the Expo Line Station in Santa Monica. As Tricia and Brad mentioned, the core part of Warner Center and the specific plan that was developed to guide its development is being transit-oriented. And for that, the Warner Center has an orange line, so a bus rapid transit station at Canoga. This is a true mobility hub. So at the Canoga station, you can find bike lockers, you can find car share spots, there are EV charging stations, and then there is something called the Warner Center Shuttle. The Warner Center Shuttle is a circulator bus that visits many of the main destinations in Warner Center from a work and play perspective. Runs at 10-minute headways, and it's designed as this first last mile connection. But when it comes to new urban mobility, it turns out that Warner Center is not as well equipped. So there are 0 public electric vehicle charging stations, although there are electric vehicle charging stations in Westfield and in some of the office buildings, especially in this kind of southern part of Warner Center. There's also no bike repair shops. So the closest one is almost 20 miles away in San Fernando Valley. There are some city-owned parking lots that are north and south of Warner Center, but there are plenty of parking garages and parking spaces in Warner Center itself. And then in terms of bike racks and bike infrastructure, the majority are located outside of the Warner Center, with only a few being in some of the Westfield properties. I'll also say that right now there aren't as many scooters in Warner Center, but there were, scooters and other dockless micromobility devices previously during the summer. So now we can look at what Warner Center will be in the future, and specifically looking at Warner Center in 2035. It's a rendering of the Westfield Promenade development in 2035. And it offers one glimpse of how Warner Center might develop. So you'll see more street-fronted properties, you'll see additional high-rises, you'll see additional entertainment options. There's even a stadium in this particular rendering, and there's also less parking. So Brad, I'm going to switch to the next slide and have you tell us a little bit more about what's planned for Warner Center 2035.
Thank you, Julia. Again, I apologize since I'm not sitting in front of a screen, but I believe you're showing the proposed projects and those approved projects under the 2035 plan on the slide?
Yes.
Okay. So, in a nutshell, there are a number of projects, including the Westfield project, that are proposing some very substantial development opportunities. If you can see at the corner of Burbank and DeSoto, for instance, there is a very large-scale 24-acre mixed-use project that will incorporate slightly over 1,000 residential units, over 1 million square feet of office space, as well as a hotel, and then some ancillary retail. And that campus in and of itself will be a significant project, and actually that's going through the entitlement phase right now. So that's something that we're looking forward to. There's also one current senior housing project under construction. I believe that has 384 units for senior citizens. There's also another very large proposed project and a portion of what used to be the Northrop Aerospace Company lot at Canoga and Burbank Boulevard, and that will have another 500 plus units of senior housing, and that's under a CCRC. So there is going to be accommodations in Warner Center to house the aging population in the West San Fernando Valley, which it is, generally speaking, an aging community. The hope is that that will free up many of the homes in the area for resale to younger families, many of whom we would anticipate having offices and working in Warner Center. If you go to the north, there is a very large piece of property, the former Rocketdyne headquarters, where the space shuttle engines were designed and built. That property can accommodate roughly 4,000 to 6,000 residential units and a mix of office space as well. It's currently being remediated and awaiting a final decision from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. But that is a large campus site that will have direct access to the Orange Line station immediately to the east across Canoga, and also access to the river, which has plans for improvements for recreational purposes along the riverbank. So those are some of the big projects, but there's, I think, a slide that's coming up that identifies the exact number of residential units and non-residential square footage that is currently approved and or proposed in Warner Center. So through those numbers and through this aerial, you can see that there's a lot of activity in Warner Center relative to new projects, new housing, and new opportunities for jobs.
Perfect. Thank you, Brad. Excellent. So you can tell that Warner Center today, 17,000 residents, 40,000 people who work there, is only going to increase in both of those numbers, meaning that if people aren't able to use other options besides their own personally owned vehicle, there's going to be major problems in terms of traffic in the area with ancillary results or ancillary impacts. So now is the section where we're going to get to what I think of as the fun stuff. It's the mobility opportunities. And for this section, and to start to classify what some of those opportunities are, we did interviews with residents, with neighborhood councils, with the state senate's office, with the city council office, with employers, the transportation management organization, and property owners. We've also looked at two sources of data, streetlight data, which we use to be able to understand how people are traveling around and within Warner Center, as well as the Transportation Management Organization did a survey of about 300 people, most of whom are employees of employers in Warner Center. Based on all of this information, we've crafted 25 mobility opportunity statements in total. I'm going to highlight 10 that we'll work on in the workshop, which Tricia, Brad, and I had thought were the top 10 of those 25. But the full list of mobility opportunity statements is at the back in an appendix of this presentation. So first, I'll share just some overarching insights from these three sources of data. In terms of insights from both streetlight data and the Transportation Management Organization survey, we realized three main things. So the first is that people really are commuting from far distances, and they're commuting mostly by car. 31% of employees travel to Warner Center and do so at a distance more than 20 miles, while only 11% of people both live and work in Warner Center. When it comes to short trips, so these non-commute trips, people are still getting in their cars. And whether they're going out at night, they're going for lunch, or they're running errands, we saw through the streetlight data that 37% of trips during lunchtime are made by vehicle and are under 2 miles. And 59% of those trips are people driving alone. The third insight that we got from the data is that people who are commuting by bicycle or walking are majority making less than $75,000 a year. And those folks are generally heading to 2 areas, an area of Warner Center called the downtown area, which is where the Westfield properties are, and then Kaiser Permanente's medical campus. When it came to the interviews, we had 4 main insights. The first is that connectivity across neighborhoods, particularly across Woodland Hills, Canoga Park, and Warner Center, can be challenging. But all 3 of these neighborhoods have slightly different characteristics and slightly different things to attend or to go to or to work at in each of them. And so people are really interested in this intra-neighborhood or inter-neighborhood connectivity. The second was that everyone agreed that the Orange Line bike path was a huge asset of the community. But apart from that separated bike lane, people felt less safe walking or cycling or scooting around the Warner Center streets themselves. The third one was that some people might not want to give up their cars. It was sort of a divided, I want to give up my car, I don't want to give up my car in terms of the interviews. But when it came to younger people and students and their parents, they were clear targets for other modes of transportation. There wasn't as much of this emotional attachment to vehicles. And the final insight from interviews was that there was a disconnect between where you can live and where you work. And for new residents, there needed to be a way to live car-free or car-light, especially if they were moving into those mixed-use or multi-unit dwellings. So the 10 highlighted opportunities for the workshop that we will focus on are split into 2 slides. Here are the first 5 mobility opportunity statements, and they are organized in a certain sentence construct. So the construct is when it comes to, and then the particular situation, people, and then a description of the people, need a way to, and then a description of the challenge or the opportunity. So the first one, when it comes to new residential developments, residents need a way to live car-free or car-light. When it comes to traveling in and near Warner Center, residents of Warner Center, Woodland Hills, and Canoga Park need a way to travel across all 3 neighborhoods. When it comes to incentivizing active transportation, people need a way to scoot, bike, and walk safely. When it comes to Orange Line station accessibility, commuters need a way to connect that first or last mile to work. When it comes to working in Warner Center, employees need a way to get to lunch quickly in under an hour, and to do so quickly and reliably without getting in their own car. The second set of opportunities is on this slide. So when it comes to improving safety on nearby major roads, drivers need a way to be more mindful of their surroundings, looking at some of the sort of Vision Zero data and what we're trying to do in terms of improving road safety from LADOT's investments. The second one is when it comes to choosing how to travel around Warner Center. Young people and their parents need a way to have more safe transportation options that don't rely on access to a personally owned vehicle. When it comes to traveling to and between Westfield properties, Westfield needs a way to provide a memorable and positive guest experience. When it comes to visiting Warner Center, especially while walking, scooting, cycling, or taking transit, people need a way to know what services, entertainment, and resources are available to them. And when it comes to getting care in Warner Center, senior residents need a way to get to appointments, receive visitors, visit friends, and run errands. So we are going to return to these 10 mobility opportunity statements during the workshop, and specifically for the activity portion of the workshop, where we're going to be working together to co-create solutions and to highlight ideas and implementable solutions around these 10 mobility opportunity statements. So as a reminder, for this January 30th workshop, we are kicking off right at 10:30 a.m. With a welcome from Councilmember Blumenfield. Then we're going to do a short overview of the workshop, a warm-up exercise and discussion, and then we're going to break into small groups for the remainder of the time. The small group exercise, we will walk you through it. It's going to be in 5 different parts, and we'll make sure that you have enough guidance to be able to do the exercises as these small groups. In terms of the location, we are going to be in Warner Center, and thanks to Douglas Emmett, we'll have a great meeting room space in the 21800 West Oxnard Street building, which you see right here. I've put instructions around how to travel there in the Google Calendar invite. If you have any questions about that, please do let me know. And just so you know, parking will be validated. And then in terms of the workshop, the results from it will be summarized into a report, and it's going to be presented to different decision makers in March, which we'll get to in a second. So for that workshop, I'd love for you to come with your brain switched on, having reviewed these materials, and definitely bringing your best ideas in terms of things that could be implemented in Warner Center that address some of these mobility opportunity statements and could be rolled out for testing and even scaled starting September 2020. So this gets us to our final topic for the webinar, and that is pathways for implementation of these particular ideas. So we mentioned before that development in Warner Center is decided on or dictated by what's called a specific plan, which is here known as the Warner Center 2035 plan. And this plan establishes what you can build and where, which is what I'm showing here on this slide. There's different kind of districts, 8 districts overall in Warner Center, and then there's sub-areas within those districts. On the right-hand side, you see what the permitted land uses are in those particular areas, as well as the non-permitted land uses like heavy manufacturing, drive-in businesses, public storage, and surface parking lots. The Warner Center specific plan also sets up a few funding mechanisms that assist with, or that are meant to assist with, traffic mitigation related to these new developments. The mobility fee, as it's called, is levied on all non-exempt new developments, and these funds go directly towards traffic mitigation projects. This money is held by LA Department of Transportation and the Department of City Planning, and it's overseen by one citizens advisory group called the Plan Implementation Board, and then a subcommittee of it, which is called the Neighborhood Protection. And Tricia, you're going to have to help me because I forgot what the second P stands for.
The Neighborhood Protection Program. Thank you.
Program. Thank you. Perfect. Right now, that program, or the Mobility Fee Trust Funds, have about $9 million total in funding. And that is, again, kind of subject to 2 things. The primary one being the Plan Implementation Board's priorities for that money. The second thing that the Warner Center specific plan sets up related to transportation is a transportation management organization. This is voluntary for existing developments, and I think is either voluntary or mandatory for new developments. I apologize, I forget which at the moment. And this is for employers and property owners to comply with transportation demand management programs. It is an annual fee, and their target is about $250,000 in budget for the TMO to run marketing programs, education programs. If the amount is larger, they could even be program managers, different mobility solutions per year. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tricia and Brad to talk about how this information relates to the 4 implementation options we have for solutions that are, initially developed during this workshop and then further vetted between now and September 2020. So Tricia, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Okay. I was, yes, thank you. So, Warner Center is a very exciting area. There's a lot of things going on there. There is a lot of, it is future and forward facing. And so, based on that, there's a lot of different things we can do in that community. And, looking at the 4 things here on the slide, if I'm looking at the correct slide, which is about implementation options, funding, and other resources, we need to work with all of our partners to make sure that we're bringing the resources into Warner Center that should be there, that allows the area to move forward, that allows the area to provide a center for commerce that presently may not exist in the Valley. If you're not looking at Burbank, if you're not looking at Glendale, it really doesn't exist here. And it's important just in terms of the influx and outflow of folks to other parts of the city each and every day, and the transportation follies that occur as part of that. So, all of that stuff is important. Julia, am I hitting on the things you want me to talk about?
Yes. So just to add some additional detail to what Tricia is talking about in terms of partnerships, the two boxes on the left-hand side of the screen talk about state funding opportunities and then the Mobility Fee Trust Fund. So as part of this project, we have been working very closely with State Senator Stern's office. They have an upcoming budget that they are looking to build out. And so their key metrics in terms of making a budget request for any project are around providing benefit to constituents, whether they are residents or businesses or whoever in Warner Center, making sure that a solution that is piloted in Warner Center could be replicated in other areas, especially throughout their district. And then the third thing being an economic development strategy for Warner Center. So they need all budget requests by the end of March. And one of the things that we'll be doing with this report from the workshop is speaking with Nick, who I believe is on this call, and the rest of State Senator Stern's office. The second bucket is on the Mobility Fee Trust Fund. I had explained, Tricia had explained the Plan Implementation Board and the Neighborhood Protection Program. So, Tricia, maybe you could provide a little bit more detail on how the Mobility Fee Trust Fund and the Plan Implementation Board works, and also the possible upcoming meeting and presentation on March 12th.
Thank you. Very happy to do so. So the mobility fee is a fee that's charged to developers who are coming in for various improvements that need to be enacted in order to absorb the either residential or commercial properties that they are developing, and to make sure that, people can get around in a reasonable fashion. And while the mobility fee itself, if I remember correctly, somewhere around 40 or 50% of what's actually required to do all of the improvements. So there is a secondary component to it, which is making sure that we get, we leverage that money by getting grant funding or other funding by, through the state, through the federal government, et cetera. So Nick and Senator Stern's help with this is crucial to ensuring that we can enact the entire vision of the Warner Center 2035 plan. The mobility fee is interesting in that, with the Plan Implementation Board, we have the ability to go ahead and prioritize and stuff and get the most important, expedient, crucial things off the list right away and make a difference for people in their everyday lives. But a lot of these things, it's the longer you're with the government, the city, etc., the more you realize that there is a lot that goes into everything that we do, and so it requires a lot of jurisdictions to work together to make sure that we're making the things happen that need to happen. And so I'm very pleased to be working with Senator Stern's office, in concert to make sure that we can accomplish goals of the plan, as well as with the Warner Center Association, with Brad and with Dave Allison, to make sure that we've got the political will behind us to make those things happen. So, yeah, I think
perfect. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Tricia. Mm-hmm. And just the upcoming opportunity with the Mobility Fee Trust Fund is that the Plan Implementation Board will be meeting on March 12, 2020, as well as the Neighborhood Protection Partnership. And so we'll be presenting the report with prioritized mobility opportunity solutions for them then. The third and fourth phase for implementation relate to employers and the transportation management organization, and then to property owners. So the transportation management organization, as I mentioned, is the sort of program management and travel demand management facilitator for large employers. They are looking at reducing vehicle miles traveled, especially commute trips, and attracting and retaining top talent in businesses. So we have an ongoing opportunity to be able to present some of these solutions to the TMO and to understand whether or not they would be good fits for some of the TMO's main priorities, as well as to understand whether or not the TMO might actually be a program manager of implementing and evaluating these mobility solutions. The final pathway is around the property owners. So in doing the interviews for this call, and also for this project rather, and in understanding what some of the different property owners and managers are looking for with regards to both their parking tenants and then other interesting things to improve their guest experience. They relate an interest in both being able to provide physical spaces and being able to provide some funding. So the physical spaces might take the place of, or might take the form of storage facilities, parking garages and lots, retail space, pop-up retail space in particular, or even office space. With the key metrics being these additional visits to properties, enhanced customer experience, and reduced vehicle miles traveled from or to and from their properties. So, Brad, did you want to add on anything else to those final two opportunities?
Sure. Just one thing that I failed to mention is when the new development projects, whether they're, if you will, a smaller scale project on 2, 3, or 4 acres, or the larger scale master plan projects, one of the key features is breaking up the super blocks that currently exist in Warner Center. So as the projects are going through the city approval process, they're being reviewed for primarily pedestrian and non-traditional transit, create a permeability through that site to the next site or the future next site, so that the super blocks that currently exist in Warner Center are broken up and become a much more pedestrian-oriented environment. So that's just a physical manifestation of the specific plan as is required for new developments. The other thing that we're going to be engaging in the not-too-distant future, or that the city will be engaging in with participation from the community, is a reanalysis of the traffic program for Warner Center. As you probably all know, from a California Environmental Quality Act perspective, projects are going to be reviewed under vehicle miles traveled rather than level of service analysis. And that turns things to a certain degree upside down in the world of transit planning and how you work towards mitigating traffic impacts. So that will begin sometime later this year, as I'm told, through the Department of Transportation and the Planning Department of Los Angeles. And that may bear on how we refocus the efforts towards improving the transit experience in and around and to Warner Center. So that will be coming up, but it may refocus even more on the technology side and the alternative side rather than the physical improvement side of traffic mitigation. So we'll see how that progresses over the next year or 2 years. I apologize, somebody's calling. In terms of Warner Center and the TMO and the property owners, I think what we have is a really unique circumstance to the extent that we have an engaged community that works towards the betterment of Warner Center, and that's the Warner Center Association. And just to create the relationship, my firm, Rosenheim and Associates, serves as the executive director of the Warner Center Association, and that's the relationship. So they're a client of Rosenheim and Associates, and we really focus on how can we enhance the quality of life in Warner Center, how can we promote Warner Center as a regional center and fulfill that opportunity as a regional center. And then just, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, my role as in VICA is I serve as the chairman of the board of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, which is composed of some of the larger businesses in the San Fernando Valley, so represents a large segment of the business community in Warner Center and serves as an advocacy organization. I say all that to the conclusion that the one thing that we have going for us, other than an engaged business community, and a business community that does work with the other stakeholders in the community as well, is that we have really great working relationships and partnerships with the municipal and state level elected officials. So we work as a team with the council office, with the state senator's office, with the assemblyman's office to fulfill the goals and objectives of the specific plan. And that's a very key thing. If we had competing interests that weren't working towards the same objective, and that is a quality urban regional center, we'd have a much more challenging time. But because we do have the participation and positive communication with Senator Stern, with Councilman Blumenfield, with Assemblyman Gabriel, we're able to accomplish more. And I think that goes towards the concept of working with the state senator's office to see what kind of funding we might be able to utilize through the state with some of our programs. And then, of course, we have the entity, the Transportation Management Organization, which is a more focused group to help us implement some of these opportunities that we're going to be pursuing. So if you think about the Los Angeles region, it's a relatively unique setup and relationship that we have with one another to be able to accomplish some really positive and unique opportunities.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brad, for summarizing that all. I'll build on that as a last thought and share a quote with you all before we go into just a few minutes of Q&A. So as Tricia and Brad and I were developing this project and developing out the workshop, one thing that came up a lot is that Warner Center is transitioning from its legacy as a suburban business park and really becoming this urban transit-oriented community. And so to do so, it's looking to experiment. It's also looking to build on its legacy of being a economic center for the aerospace industry with tenants like Boeing and others, to becoming more of this economic center for transportation innovation in the future. And I think that's why you have so many of the folks and communities aligned on this call to really be able to push that mission forward. And that is the context in which we're going to be embarking on our work next Thursday. So the quote I'll share with you before doing this Q&A is something that I heard during one of the interviews, and I thought it summarized what I just said very clearly. And that is what I love about Warner Center is that it's so counterintuitive to the perceived Valley culture. We could be a model for suburbia across the country. And so that, again, speaks to this idea that what we could potentially be testing out in Warner Center could be scaled around LA and in other places around the U.S. So with that, I'll say a big thank you to Tricia and Brad. Open it up for questions now and go ahead and mute myself, and you all can unmute yourselves and ask some questions. Just know that because we only have a few minutes today, if you want to send me some questions via email, I will put together a sheet answering those and making sure that everybody in the workshop has access to them. All right, I'll mute myself, and thanks again.
Yeah, good morning. This is Sean Phillips. Around the process, once the solutions are developed and you're trying to meet that March 12th date, is there any plan to kind of bring back some of the residents or employers to kind of help us scrub the solutions, or, this is what we discovered, what do you guys think about that? Is that already in a plan to do that?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I think in terms of getting some feedback for the solutions, first of all, City Council and State Senate office had volunteered to have eyes on that report. In terms of those presentations, the opportunity there is for residents and employers to be able to weigh in. And so further develop out these proofs of concept before then they move into implementation paths. Open to your suggestions, though, about what would make sense in terms of engaging them prior to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Josef Kessler. My question is, I work for a private mobility company. We make secure bike parking facilities in New York City. My question is, if we may or may not be able to attend the meeting, the workshop next week in LA, how could we still be considered as part of the plan going forward if we're not able to make the meeting?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Josef. Let's go ahead and do this. If others are not able to attend the workshop next week, please just send me a note and we'll find a time to connect. In the future, we're looking at using a software platform to be able to put out an RFI type, so a request for information type solution where we will be able to appeal to a broader audience than is available to be in person in the workshop.
Will the RFI software be applicable for this project?
Yes, we're looking to pilot it for this project and just going through the motions and figuring out how to do that. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
And I was just going to suggest that a contribution of maybe $1 million towards this effort would get you in, but maybe that would be inappropriate.
Brad, can we mute him, please?
Sorry. Are there any other questions?
Hey, this is Paul Heitlinger from Avis Budget. Just so I'm clear, the deliverable after next Thursday, there is no deliverable after next Thursday other than the workshop that day, correct? And then we would have a deliverable, which would be a proposed solution that needs to be delivered after that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so just to clarify, we are going to be using the workshop to co-create solutions, which will then be captured in a report. This report will be relatively high level and will be used to prioritize some of those solutions to be built out using more of a sprint-like proof of concept development. At that time, that's when we're looking to pilot the software solution for being able to put out an official RFI for other solutions.
Got it. So on the day, we should come out of that with a potential path forward, a potential solution on the Thursday.
Correct.
Got it.
And that would be wonderful. Brad is ever the cheerleader, and I'm so glad to hear him push people forward. We look forward to seeing everything that comes out of this effort.
And this is Brad. I just want to thank everybody for participating today and next week.
Perfect. Okay. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end the call. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, Julia.